Sting is going to be essentially kicked out of the main event mafia. Um, they're all going to beat him down. Nash is going to power bomb him. I mean, that probably made the most sense. Like Sting, we want to be a babyface. The main event mafia were supposed to be heels. Was it overbooked to get there, or was this always the plan, do you think?
So the balance between, I'll say, and I don't want to pit those because it sounds like, but there would be a Vince Russo layer upon layer of storylines, and then there would be maybe a Dutch Mantel mindset of how can we kind of dumb this down? And look, Borash was in the room from time to Borash was always in the room. Bill Banks, Mike Tenay, just depending on what era, but everybody kind of voiced their opinion on how we're going to arrive there. And at times, hell yeah, it was when I read some of the notes, when we go back and do the research, some of the notes I go, "Good God, what were we thinking?" It was too much. But that's kind of when you get caught up in things. And then at other times, it was to the weekly watcher, these layers meant something. And I think, that's where we get into the modern discussion, story, not story. It's a tough balance that you have to tell stories, and they better be simple for the casual viewer to bite into. And so, who's your audience? How are you going to serve multiple masters? How intricate are you going to be? And if you get too intricate, which we're probably about to talk about here in a minute, is layer upon layer upon layer, then all of a sudden it gets complicated. And in our vocabulary, me and Connie will go, "Hey man, that shit was overbooked, wasn't it?"
Let's talk a little bit about where we are with your storyline. We're going to talk about this a lot next week, but this is going to be your second to last match in TNA in 2009. You'll team up with AJ Styles to take on Kurt Angle and Samoa Joe in a TNA title match. That's right, a tag team match for the world title. The idea here is Angle makes you pass out from the ankle lock for the victory, so he retains the title. And the show ends with Sting making the save and disappearing with the TNA title belt. As I said, we're going to talk about some of the backstage goings on next week. But did you know at this point that this was going to be, your second to last match of the year, or is that all just a curveball coming your way,
buddy? Not a curveball that I had zero clue. It's much easier to look back on this time frame now and look at and I've admitted it. I don't say we were playing, but I had no idea the pieces of the puzzle that would be put together, and I'll say behind my back, but they were behind my back. I was in my personal life trying to rebuild it. I didn't know people were going to be pulling against me on that. In my professional life, I think TNA had never been as successful as it had been from about January of 09 till up to we're talking right now, July of 09. And so for me, you were asking the question, did I know this was going to be my second to last match? The furthest thing from that.
So the ratings are strong. You're going to do a 1.23 on June 18th. That gets a 1.6 million viewership number. That's a 0.82 in males 18 to 34 and a 0.92 in males 35 to 49. Mm-hmm. Spike is supposed to be a guy's channel. They got to be happy with you. And so does Kurt Angle, because here's a note from the Observer in this era. They flew in Jeff Jarrett's doctor for the pay-per-view, who does non-traditional therapy and fixes everyone up. And Kurt Angle said he had never felt better getting out of bed Monday morning. Who was this magic man?
You've met him on the show, pal. Q3health.com, but Dr. Adair. Tim, I went and saw him last week. Got a little tune up after my Hangman match. That power bomb on the apron kind of rung out. But no, it was, and Tim actually came back in the Asylum days from time to time. And then he, started to get in the rhythm of coming. So he was coming to Orlando often. But yeah, sometimes it was hard. It would be hard to get guys to, I don't say trust, but to get them to sit down and let Dr. Tim work on them. But He's the best I've ever been around, but that's who it was. Dr. Tim Adair.
Storyline wise, Foley's going to come out and start cutting a promo about you. You're going to get involved. We're going to set up a special guest referee. We're also going to get a match here. Kurt Angle is going to be wrestling, and Eric Young is going to ring the bell when Mick Foley is in the ankle lock. So we're recreating the Montreal storyline. We've got Raven and Shane Douglas, who are easing out of TNA in this era. Warner Brothers is the only company who's even making an attempt to purchase Midway, which is the company who produced the TNA video games. They're going to purchase Midway for $33 million out of bankruptcy. And your final appearance on TV is this. It's a main event story where we've got Angle versus Sting in a cage match. You're on commentary. Samoa Joe is going to attack you and then beat up Rudy Charles and get the keys to the cage. And a video with the team FTW, that's the term, is on the wall. Joe put Sting in Taz's choke. Jarrett and Foley try to save Sting, but couldn't get in the cage. Nash, Steiner, and Booker are going to attack Jarrett and Foley, and the show ends with all the faces down. We know FTW can only mean one thing. Taz is coming in. Are you pleased with the way the Mafia story was going? And what can you tell us about bringing Taz in?
And I was elated with the way the Mafia story. I cannot recall, rack my brain. I probably need to ask a few folks, but the setup for the FTW and how we were going to transition Joe and just that entire story, I can't really remember. And I wish maybe we'll look into to a deep dive in the notes. But the answer to your question about the Mafia is, like I said, it was the people bought into the foundation of the story. Mafia, the veterans against the frontline, AJ and you know, the Beer Money and a lot of the, we'll call them TNA originals. All that had layered in and people had bought in, and we were getting to a point in the transition on the Mafia. We were gonna, you know, Sting, as I said, Sting and Kurt, and were we gonna put somebody else in there? How were we going to, you know, was it going to go down to 4? Were we going to replace Sting? But the FTW, I can't recall exactly what that was going to be, because I think all of those plans, and like we said, we'll get to it, were completely scrapped in the next 30 days, 60 days.
Let's talk about some questionable things that are happening here. It's reported that Miss Jackie is no longer with WW or TNA rather, but more importantly, Rudy Charles, friend of the show, real name Dan Engler, it's reported in the Observer here, was fired in a cost-cutting move. The move shocked a lot of people, both because he was popular with management and had been with the company from the start, but also because he did so many different jobs. The feeling is they'll just hire a local referee to replace him, and that others in the office will pick up the jobs he was doing, but they'll all have to be trained at it. Besides being a referee and involved in the timing of the shows, he also sat in on creative meetings. The feeling was they could save on trans by using a referee who lived in Florida. This feels like one step forward and 2 steps back, knowing what he did behind the scenes. I can't imagine you were in favor of this. How the hell does this happen?
Well, and this is where again, this episode is Victory Road 2009, but the behind the scenes, I guess all the story had not come out. This was a part of the Dixie Carter power play, plain and simple. To say that I was shocked now or 90 days after this, it was much easier to clear. But of all people, Rudy was certainly, you know, didn't have this big high dollar contract. The hats that he wore, the glue, if you will, because his laptop, look, he was, to this day, super organized, but I mean, he had every show, just a conduit, had notes upon notes upon notes. I mean, Rudy had a file to tell you how deep his notes went. They were just Dutchisms, just sayings that Dutch would say during creative meetings. So he would have 4 or 5 windows opened up or files open during creative meetings, and some of them were just funny sayings. But no, I can't say enough good things about Danny today, my man. But during this time, Conrad, he Yeah, I mean, you just kind of laid it out that he was the creative keeper of the key of so many things. I mean, whether it was Vince or Dutch or JB, hey Rudy, don't let me forget. Hey Rudy, make sure. Yep, I've got this in the file. He just was the kind of point person. And look, I've been in creative rooms at we'll call it at the highest level at planning out WrestleMania and here and that. But when you kind of see the person who, I don't just say takes notes, but just kind of keeps everything on point, it is so vital. And yes, he was, longtime referee, day one guy, but he just knew so much because he was in the middle of everything. And when it happened, I was like, of all people, Dixie. But behind the scenes, she had already, I was she had already pulled the trigger, and I was in the crosshairs. Rudy, and I guess we're going to get into this in another episode. But the dominoes fell. There was a pretty big head count that were swooped away overnight. And I say overnight, within 30 days. And this was a part of it. Yeah. I mean, I don't know where to start or stop here, but yeah, letting Rudy go was moronic.